Tare ture Mangalam Shri Mahapani Swaha Om Tare ture Mangalam Shri Mahapani Swaha Om Tare ture Mangalam Shri Mahapani Swaha Om Tare ture Mangalam Shri Mahapani Swaha.
A warm welcome to all of you joining us today for Lama Life livestream event of Lama Sultrim Alione. I'm Dreame, connecting with you from Poland. It's always a pleasure to be here as we gather virtually this way. Today, we are joined by two incredible guests, Magyu Lopön Charlotte Rotterdam and Gena McCarthy. Lopön Charlotte has studied Tibetan Buddhism for the last 20 years, was authorized to teach by Lama Sultrim Alione in 2006, and received the title of Magyu Lopön, lead teacher of Magyu, the mother lineage at Taramandala, from Lama Sultrim in 2016. Lopön Charlotte teaches in the US and abroad, often in partnership with her husband Peter Oosthuizen, and co-leads the Boulder Taramandala Sangha. She is the co-developer of the Feeding Your Demons online certification program. Currently, she is an instructor and director of the Center for the Advancement of Contemplative Education at Naropa University. Gena McCarthy is an EMDR certified perinatal psychotherapist. She is the founder and developer of the Birth Spirituality and Healing Network, the Contra Costa County Perinatal Depression to Wellness Network, and developed two local HMO perinatal integrative health programs. She co-founded the East Bay San Francisco Peer Perinatal Professional Ceremony Circle. Gena is a longtime Taramandala Sangha member. She has been trained in cross-cultural shamanic, Buddhist, Cherokee peacekeeping practices, and perinatal psychology. Get ready to be inspired and give in to reflection as we delve into this conversation of Gena and Lopön Charlotte together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, dear Dreame, and welcome everyone. It's lovely to be with you today, and I see some of you are already writing in a hello, so please continue to do that. Gena, do you want to say hello as well?
I'm so happy to be here. Welcome, everybody. It's really touching to be with Sangha and talk about such meaningful issues with a dear teacher and friend. And thank you, Dreame.
Thank you, Gena. Gena's a dear Dharma sister. We've known each other a long time, and I've had the chance also to teach together on several occasions. So we'll be sharing some of our work and our vision around motherhood and sacred motherhood and mothering, both for those of you who may be mothers and for all of us, a connection to the Great Mother. But before we begin, let's take a moment to ground and feeling very simply our bodies, feeling the warmth of your belly. Perhaps you can feel into your heartbeat, this pulse of life that we all share. Becoming aware of your breath. Which is an ongoing exchange with the world around us. A receiving and a letting go through the in-breath and the out-breath. letting yourself be nurtured and nourished with every in-breath. Every cell receiving oxygen. And then on the exhale, releasing all that is no longer needed. And knowing that our exhale is also an offering to our plant brothers and sisters. And let's raise our motivation for this time together. That in some way, our time together, our reflections, our sharing, our contemplations may be of benefit to ourselves, to this community, and ultimately to all beings everywhere. Thank you. So yesterday was Earth Day, and maybe some of you joined Peter and me for the Earth Day webcast we did. And I started by saying, well, Earth Day is sort of the ultimate Mother's Day because the earth is all of our mothers. And so it feels very fitting that today I'm continuing this conversation now with Gena around the sense of motherhood and really sacred motherhood and the sacred mother. We'll be sharing some of our own reflections on this topic, and I'll be asking Gena some questions about the work she's been doing for decades in this arena. And then we'll also Gena will offer a meditation for us to deepen into our experience. So yeah, let's begin with this topic of sacred motherhood and the sacred mother. And what do we really mean by this? What does it evoke in us? And Gena, I wonder if you'd begin with some reflections from your end.
Thank you. Thank you. So yeah, we've both sat with that a little the last few days. And it really brings up for me so many things. And some of what it brings up is the work I've done for, 40 years or more on the one hand, healing birth trauma and seeing so many women heal completely from that very difficult circumstance. And then being able to show up for the birth of their second child or for just relating with their first child from a place of feeling safe in their bodies to open to love. So I've seen that for years and years and years. So for me, the subject is very much a both and. It includes suffering and it includes healing. And it also includes what's possible. And so I've seen so much healing and repair. And I've offered ceremonies for years to help repair and prepare so people can really feel empowered and supported to walk into that sacred experience of birthing and mothering. And so now I teach people how to be perinatal ceremony facilitators. And, all our ancient peoples did that. They offered ceremony so that they could really be prepared for this amazing experience. So I actually brought a book with me to show you The Tibetan Art of Parenting by Anne Maiden Brown, which lists before China invaded Tibet. So up until the 1950s, these preconception, conception, gestation, parenting, and newborn and postpartum ceremonies and prayers and care and community care were all being done to honor sacred mothering, sacred parenting, sacred birth. And of course, we know as Buddhists that precious human life is a great opportunity. So part of my work has been to raise consciousness that mothering and parenting is in the center and the core of the mandala of human life. And a lot of us sometimes don't really want to look at that because there's been a lot of including myself at times, there's been a lot of intergenerational trauma. And so a lot of those relationship lines have felt disconnected. And yet when we bring healing to them, so much repair can happen. And when you think of a mandala, it radiates out when you start at the center. So I'll just say maybe a bit about my own personal story too. So I got into this, I think, for many reasons, including my karma, obviously. I was born on the first day of spring, but I was born in a way that many people nowadays, it's not that unfamiliar what happened. So I was over anesthetized with my mom and had a big experience of that. And then I was born, luckily, we lived. So that was a huge template in my life. And I wanted to be a mother. So it was in my interest to learn how to heal and grow. And ultimately, I was able to gather enough healing and growth that between my own intention and between luck or karma, or however we want to see it, I actually did end up with a child. And then I, like many mothers, had to do so much work to really open my heart to the love that I had. It didn't just flow all the time, but now it does. And so, and I see that in all my clients, that there's so much potential for healing. There's a couple of more things I want to say about sacred mothering. Let's see if I remember them. One is that mothers, when they give birth, just like meditators, when they meditate to a very deep level, and women, I don't know so much about male anatomy, I'm sorry, when they have an orgasm, but one beyond the normal orgasm, all of that involves people's brainwaves slowing down very deeply, and then ultimately going into gamma, which is a peak experience. And a lot of people don't even know that we are innately physiologically designed to feel compassion and bliss when we give birth. But for that to happen, we need to feel cared for, loved, and respected. And that's a big deal. And we need to feel safe. And we need to feel that in our bodies, and we need to feel that around us. But it's possible. And even though, sadly, birth trauma is increasing right now, also is increasing many women who are learning this path and actually giving birth and having this experience. So we see that whatever happens, it's all sacred. Whether we've had a difficult or traumatic birth, or we've had an orgasmic, blissful birth, we can bring healing either way. So either way, we have the capacity to create a template of love and awareness in this mandala in the center. And so that's part of why I'm so grateful to be talking with you today and with our Sangha, because I feel like this is really bringing our practice to our bodies, bringing our practice to spirit, embodying into form, and honoring that in the way it needs, and in a culture that does not support mothering or parenting. And so I think it's so important and great that we're doing this.
Thank you, Gena.
Hmm.
Really appreciate the weaving you do of suffering and healing, and the invitation in motherhood and in birthing to come into this quality of love. Really, you talked about opening the heart, and even that peak experience. What is that peak experience, right? From the Buddhist standpoint, it's waking up to our true nature, waking up to our Buddha nature, waking up to absolute bodhicitta, the awakened heart, and living that. So, I think my own experience and thoughts on this resonate so much with what you've shared. And, just since you told a little bit about your story, I thought I'd also share in this question of sacred motherhood or mothering or the sacred mother, feeling into who I am as a mother right now. And I have 2 sons, and my oldest is about to be 18 in May, and my younger one is 14. So my older one is about to leave home and go to college, and I can feel this incredible heartbreak that's happening. And, I realize at a rational level, everyone knows, I know, that what we do with our children is we raise them and we give them tools and skills, and hopefully they have all the resources they need so that they can go off, right? The whole purpose in some ways of parenting is to set someone off onto this grand adventure of life. And so we want them, I want him to go out, and he's doing it in a beautiful way, but I can feel heartbreak of just losing. And so it feels like a loss, right, of someone who is so dear and close to me. And so when I open this question, what is sacred motherhood, or what I mean by sacred here is really, what is motherhood as a spiritual path? What has it taught me on the spiritual path? It is really a path of continuously opening my heart more and more, which is really the path of all of our Dharma practice, right? It's really about cultivating bodhicitta, but as you said beautifully, Gena, it's actually coming into the recognition of our inherent awakened heart, that who and what we really are, which is an awakened heart. And then, of course, well, what is the awakened heart? And on one hand, it's so beautiful, right? It's so inspiring. It's that sense that we have the capacity to love. I mean, I could just put a period at the end of that. Our capacity to love, our inherent capacity to love.
And may I weave with you for a moment, dear? Okay. Well, I just want to pause there because you said so much of what I think is valuable and important to many of us, which is the importance of loving ourselves about our heartbreaking. Because I think that piece we often forget, the compassion for that pain and suffering without judgment. Because for all of us, it has different roots. For some people, it's more than the letting go of our precious, beautiful children into the world. For some of us, it brings up our own experience with our own launching, or it brings up intergenerational things. So sometimes we can't even explain why we feel so miserable. But it's hard sometimes to connect with that innate awakened heart. You know this. And so I'm just reminding us to bring compassion to when we just feel like we can't open. Thanks.
Yeah. No, I think that's important, because I think we do tend, when we feel vulnerable or when we feel that breaking of the heart, to our natural instinct. I mean, it's instinctual, is to contract, to get smaller, to in a way protect ourselves. And we can protect ourselves. But I think there's a way, and this again, I think I've had to practice on the path of mothering, is how can I hold tenderness for those parts of myself, like in this moment, right, of that heartbreak, and let that tenderness and that gentleness with which I hold it allow me to stay in the experience of open-heartedness. So how is my gentleness and that compassion for my tenderness a way of staying in vulnerability? Because, this is the sort of beauty I see in the teachings of bodhicitta, is that both our ability to stay in the vulnerability of the awakened heart is also where our strength is, which seems counterintuitive, right? But that staying in the softness is actually where we begin to tap into a profound strength. And to use maybe, just the language of love, is that to love is an incredible strength, is our ultimate strength. When we come from a place of love for ourselves, for another, for the world, in some sense, we're invincible.
I really agree with that. And, I've received a lot of support from you over the years, because I'm just going to say it, you're my Kalyana Mitra. So I get direct, loving support, wisdom from Lopön Charlotte. And, one of the things you, among others, but very especially you, have brought forward a lot is the bringing spaciousness and compassion to the different places. And the reason why I'm honing in on this is because even though I hear what you're saying and I agree with you, I think for a lot of us, there's a missing step that you remind me of in our conversations, and I'm bringing out here now, which is, again, for example, when I feel vulnerable, the first thing I will do is shut down. I will disassociate and I will numb. And from old trauma triggers. Okay, so then if I bring that softness, that love, that compassion to shutting down, that's when I start to feel safe to be vulnerable and be. So there's that step that I think is very important. It's like first you get it. Yeah.
Yes, I think it's very important to welcome the shutting down.
Yeah.
That can be held. And I'm seeing in the chat here from Ron, grief is an opportunity. Meet it with openness. Yeah, and I think to hear what you're also saying, Gena, is that meet the grief with gentleness. And we don't have to break through it. We actually can hold it gently. And in that holding gently, it can open into the opportunity that here I think is spoken of. And I'm wondering, just bringing this back to my experiences of motherhood and, the question, and again, this is a question I think for all mothers, parents, but really for all of us who have any kind of vow of the Bodhisattva vow of benefiting others, is what does it mean to benefit another being? What does it mean, as a mother what is it to be a good mother? What is it to benefit these beings whom I call my children? And we can look at our world. What is it to benefit our earth, to benefit other beings? And that is such an open question, right? There's no recipe. This is, the life, it's really, when I teach on compassion, so there's no training manual. There's no secret booklet that you get. Do these 10 things and you will live the compassionate life. You will benefit beings. There are basics, right? Do no harm and not killing and stealing, the ones we know of. But really, in a given moment, what is of greatest benefit? And I think there's something around, one is willingness to be with not knowing. That seems critical here, that I meet a situation, let's say I meet a difficulty my child is having or we're having in our family, and there's no out, Right. This is also the intensity, I think, of parenting. There's no out. You can't walk away. And really in our life, we can never walk away from anything ultimately. So how can I be in it and in a kind of that humility of not knowing so that I remain wakeful to what is really of benefit, what is really needed? And that can look any number of ways. Sometimes it means being gentle and soft. Sometimes it means giving real advice or doing something. Sometimes it means just holding space and letting the process unfold. And sometimes there's fierceness, right? I know we've talked about the fierce mother, and that fierce compassion of the no can actually be the most compassionate thing, the most beneficial. Yeah. What do you think of this? How do we benefit? What comes up for you?
Well, honestly, what really rang a bell in everything you said, which was all intriguing and stimulating, was there's no manual. And it's almost like I want to beg to differ, but not exactly.
Okay, we're getting it from you, Gena. I want it.
Okay. So, like my mother would say that all the time. There's no manual. I was just telling my husband this last night, and I think that transmitted because the perinatal ceremonies, they are a manual and they're so beautiful. And all our cultures had them to prepare to be parents. Like I said, that book I showed you about the Tibetan Buddhists have that, but we didn't necessarily bring that to America, to our own community. So one of the things they had was a lot more community support holistically for parents. And here it's a challenge to build community, but you can. And our Sanghas are community. And that's part of the reason I do these retreats and I do these talks and other things, is to unite our practice and our Sangha with this precious sacred act of mothering and birthing and parenting. And then another thing is, so in the Dagara tribe in Burkina Faso, Sobonfu Somé, who wrote a beautiful book called Welcoming Spirit Home, before they ever have a baby, the couple begins to purify and prepare. And one of the first things they do is a ceremony where they get in touch with anything from their childhood that feels unfinished. So they can, and they pray about it, so they can start to feel how vulnerable that baby of theirs and that child of theirs is going to feel. So they start to have more empathy and compassion for it. And then they also pray to the child's spirit, and they also do purification rituals. They're recognizing we're welcoming a precious human life. So there's so much community and personal and spiritual attention and physical attention on preparing and feeling supported and empowered and skillful, which most of us do not feel when we give birth to this culture. And so to me, bringing back those ceremonies, or whatever form works for you, but connecting with your deities, with your loving wisdom helpers, with your community, to be supported for what you're going through and to be seen. Not, oh, you're so busy because you have to get an ultrasound and you have to see 6 doctors. You're so busy because you're growing a sacred human life in your womb. You're midwifing spirit into form. Your souls are meeting, your karmas are meeting. It's an incredible, mind-blowing experience. So that's the first thing I feel, is let people start to prepare and support each other in this act. And then now, how do we bring benefit to our children? I think it's a lot of what you've been saying, is that continuous practice of, really 2 things. One, our practice in general, of course, helps tremendously. And then another thing is really recognizing if you have unfinished business in your reproductive history or in your relationship with your mother or your relationship with your parents. That is not a small thing. That is something that is worth bringing loving compassion and healing and support to, because that changes your relationship with your own inner nourishment, your own inner mothering, and that changes relationship with the earth, the great mother, and that supports you to live a more liberated life, and that opens you to your spiritual practice. And so I really think it's kind of many of those things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Just reflecting on what you said earlier about community. And it's interesting. I think, again, in my own experience, I had two very different experiences with my first child, who was born when I was living at Taramandala. And it had very much this feeling of living in a village and, being supported in community. And I would bring him to work, and he would people would take him. And, as he got a little older, okay, we're taking him, we're setting up the cushions in the gompa. And then I go back to that person. I said, oh no, he went off with that person who had to go to town to buy something. And it was really this beautiful sense of being held by the whole community, and that he was a part of that, and that he was raised really by this vast family. And a lot of them were young people, who were sort of more like his older sisters and brothers, which was really wonderful. And then with my younger one, I had moved back to Boulder, and it was one of the loneliest times of my life, because here I was with these two little children, and I was just working very part-time. And all my other friends had their kids and were so busy with them, and we rarely connected. And it was so lonely. And I thought, this is so odd. How can I have children and be so alone? So I think what you're speaking to is the broader ramification, for those of us as mothers, certainly for the children, but as a society, what we lose when we've split off parenting and raising specifically young children in isolation. Yeah. I want to come to the question that was put in the chat here from Naomi, to speak a little bit more about fierceness and what is fierce love, and how can we be fierce in our relationship. So maybe I'll offer a few reflections and then wonder what this brings up for you, Gena. So maybe I'll just begin again. When I was living at Taramandala and I had become a mother, one day Lama Tsultrim showed up. I think it was for my birthday, and she gave me a tanka of Trauma. And Trauma is the blue-black fierce mother. And she said, this is to may Trauma bring out the fierceness within you. And I was a little, I was like, oh, well, what does that mean? What does it mean to bring fierceness? And, there's Trungpa Rinpoche has talked about, and other teachers, about something called idiot compassion. And it's kind of an intense term, right? But the sense of idiot compassion is compassion that comes as some sense of, compassion is all about just being nice, or about smiling, or about giving someone a hug, or, that there's some kind of sweetness about compassion that always has to be there, or that compassion has one way only that it manifests. And he called it idiot compassion because it doesn't have wakefulness to what's really of most benefit in the moment, what's really called for, right? So like one time when we were living in Pagosa, there was this great bakery. It's still there, Pagosa Baking Company. And it's right, it lets out on the busiest street, the main sort of road that goes through Pagosa. And Mateo, who was maybe 2.5, 3 at the time, ran down the stairs and was about to run into the road. Now, being nice and saying, hey, sweetie, please come off the road, was not the compassionate thing to do, right? The compassionate thing was to say no and grab him out of the road, right? So that's very direct, fierce compassion. But I think, Naomi, your question obviously is a more subtle inquiry into what is fierceness in love. And one, you know, what is trauma? She has the trigug, she has the dakini knife, which cuts through delusion, which cuts through confusion and brings clarity. So there are times in relationships, and this is whether it's in parenting or, you know, a partner or work relationships, any relationship, when we see something clearly. Perhaps we see where someone is caught in their own delusion, or we are caught in our own delusion, and we cut through. And there's a kind of letting it drop. Let the story go. Let that behavior be seen and let go of. You know, cut through the, excuse my language, but BS. And that can be fierce, right? It's like when we cut through, we want to cut through with a clean knife, not blunt knife. And so using the energy of fierceness, or what we might sometimes think of as anger, but bring it into wisdom. It's sort of like the loving no, or the wisdom no, or the wisdom, I see this, and it might not be comfortable, but in naming it, it actually becomes a compassionate offering.
Even though it's tempting to say more about that, yes, to what you just said, I see a question I'm very attracted to answer. What of a mother who rejects the mother energy, feels disconnected, and doesn't want to connect? How does a child host space for their mother who rejects the connection? So I really appreciate that question, Mani. And, you know, that's not, sorry about my glasses, it's a thing. Anyway, that's not an uncommon experience because so many of our mothers had, you know, trauma. I mean, just right off the bat, you know what? I had a Romanian Jewish mother. So right away, you know, there was a lot of feelings of unworthiness in her because of what was going on. And then there's the cutoffs with the relatives who live in Europe, and it goes on, trying to assimilate. And so then all these shutdowns. And so then, and my mother was didn't want children, was terrified of them. And so then she's my mom. And so, you know, I can laugh now and talk about it sweetly now, and I have love for her now, but that was not always the case. And I would say it's a very simple path about mothers like that. First of all, have compassion for how you feel. You might feel rage. You might feel, I should forgive, but I don't even want to think about her. Or you might feel obsessed. I mean, there are just so many ways our triggers and our encumberments show up. And so I think the path home is always the same. Show compassion to yourself, or pray for compassion to yourself about all of those feelings. And then, of course, you know, if you know the Feeding Your Demons practice, it's a great practice to do for this, that Lama Sultram wrote a book about, where you feed the demon of whatever the feeling is, the big feeling. And that's another way. And there's so many ways, including healing sessions and so on. But let yourself have all of that, because it's baggage for you. It doesn't sit easy in us. And I know for myself, it revolutionized my life coming to healing with my own mother. And it took years, actually. So I'm not saying that lightly. But anything in our path is worth healing. And at the same time, I have another spiritual teacher for many years, Angeles Arian, and she would say, don't go digging for stuff. Just take care of what's knocking on your door now. So there's no shoulds. But if you find that this is a big or significant encumberment in your field now, then start to let it get love and start to let it get healing and loving attention, and it will come to peace. And people can call and consult with me, or whatever feels appropriate, but there's a lot of resources, including in the Tara Mandala network.
Thank you, Gena. Thank you for these rich questions, deep questions. So I know we want to do a few more things. We want to offer a meditation, but I also wanted to share with all of you a little bit and ask you some questions, Gena, about an upcoming retreat. So Gena will be offering a day-long retreat on May 12th, or May 13th, Saturday, May 13th, day before Mother's Day. And it's called Honoring Mothers in the Refuge of Practice and Sangha. And you've spoken so beautifully, Gena, about your work in teaching these kind of retreats, leading mothers, honoring the space of motherhood, and specifically also leading ceremonies on healing birth. And I wonder if you could speak just a little bit more about, specifically the purpose of the retreat, but also how this feeds into what you might see as sort of the needs of our time in terms of these questions.
Thank you so much. So, well, first of all, the purpose of the retreat is really in the name, and honoring and supporting mothers and parents and anyone with mother issues in the Refuge of Practice and Sangha. And so, we're going to have a lot of time to be honored and connecting with our strengths and our beauty, which is so important to remember, because it's like we're living in a 1950s culture where instead of mother being held as the sacred core center of the mandala, it's being held with a lot of inner and outer criticism or neglect. And so taking time to really honor and claim the beauty of who we are and what we're doing. And then also time to renew and or heal as it calls to you. So I'll just give you a simple story of how these ceremonies work. And what you said, even more to the point, is why do we need them in our times? And I think, we've covered that a lot in a way, which is sadly, there's so much disconnection in our world. And it's also very much in the birth and parenting world. And it comes from, among other things, not putting it in the center where it belongs and supporting it, because it's precious human life. And so here's a lovely example of what can happen in a healing ceremony. And again, you can just come because you're a mama, and it's hard to be a mama in this culture. You're working, you're cooking, you're driving, you're loving, and you need a break. You need a retreat spa day. And so you can just have that healing ceremony for your own renewal, because it's going to be spaciously done. Or you can use it to actually heal a root imprint. And here's an example of just one example. I was working with a beautiful Tibetan Buddhist practitioner. And this example gives you sees the relationships that I know you all are familiar with to different degrees. So she was a very happy woman. She had beautiful lamas, relationships, and a husband, and she was pregnant. And then she had a problem with her pregnancy, and she had to go on bed rest. And she became very depressed. She was not actually isolated. She had a big family. She felt very depressed. So we worked on that. And she had a beautiful connection with white Tara. And white Tara is known to support childbirth as green Tara is. And that's part of why I'm wearing the white pearls. And so because white Tara is very much, among other things, compassion, spacious compassion. And so she brought white Tara to the part of herself that was so depressed. So, that's what we're talking about the whole time, rather than judging ourselves or closing down, just connecting these parts. And so she did that in a meditation, which of course is very effective for healing because it goes beyond the cognitive and it actually hits the biological places where healing takes place. And so she did this in a meditation, and she felt white Tara's compassion, and she realized that her mother had been very depressed when she was pregnant with her. And so, of course, these imprints wake up in our nervous system unconsciously, whether we're conscious of it or not. So then she brought white Tara to when her mother was pregnant with her. And then her mother got to receive that love of white Tara. Because as we know, and I'm not an expert in saying this clearly, essentially all time is now. So I can't explain that to you scientifically, but that's actually how it works in the healing world and in everything. And so she brought white Tara to her mother when she was pregnant with herself. And her mother felt all that compassion and support because her mother had been new to this country and was working hard and had felt very depressed and unsupported. And now her mother felt supported. And now she felt supported. And the rest of her pregnancy on bed rest, she was a happy woman. And that's just one example. There's so many examples of how you can connect these parts. And we know this. We know this from our practice. We've experienced it in many different ways. So that's basically a little nutshell of what the retreat will be and how the healing ceremony works. And then we end with one of my favorite meditations that I learned from Lopön Charlotte. And that is this beautiful letting go of anything heavy into the earth. And it's such a great way. I had the pleasure and sweetness of offering this retreat with Lopön Charlotte for 2 years in a row. And it's such a beautiful meditation. And also, I want to bring light to the healing road that I think all of you know, but it's worth mentioning, reminding ourselves. The healing road is expansion, contraction, expansion, settle, expansion, integrate. So there's the healing renewal ceremony where you expand or you renew, but there's still growth. And then we have this letting go of anything heavy and just letting go and being supported by the earth. So the day is a beautiful container.
Yes, thank you, Gena. And Monica, to your question, it's an online retreat, so you can be anywhere and do it. So definitely encourage you to join. Maybe just one more question. I have many questions for you, but we'll just have one more maybe. You've talked a lot about healing and also renewal, and even this quality of spa day, which I love. But that sense of, I think you even have this in your description of a vision for this day to be a place of rest, of transformation, healing, and of renewal. And I wonder, your story of white Tara was so beautiful, but what would you say just broadly? What is that source of renewal that you're inviting people to tap into?
Wow, what a great, deep question. That's just such a beautiful question. I think there's many sources. One of the biggest sources is Sangha. I was thinking the other day of what Lama Sultram said about Sangha. Sangha is the most intimate relationship people have because when you come together doing spiritual practice, that's the most naked and bright light you are. And so you're meeting each other that way. And that in and of itself is so nourishing. And there's going to be time for dyads and witnessing. And also in Sangha, there's a lot of compassion. So you get to receive other people witnessing you with compassion and care, which is very healing. And then there's your spiritual resources. And those we know are not only the loving wisdom helpers, however we experience them. So for some of us, that's Tara, Machig, and for others of us, it's other experiences. But also, essentially, it's our essential nature that we come home to. It's who we already are. That's almost this beautiful full circle. That's why it's so beautiful to support women to feel safe and cared for and respected when they give birth, because then more and more people, the mother and the baby, have this template of the awakened heart to start with, a strong experience of that. And that's what we come to in moments when we're renewing. It all makes me want to cry in a good way. Yeah.
Beautiful, Gena. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so shall we do a little bit of practice together? Maybe this is a good segue.
Thank you. Good. So let's just settle. And I'm going to look at the time so I have a sense of good. All right. So I'll do it about 7 minutes. So let's just settle into our bodies, our precious human lives, and taking a moment to feel our feet. And to feel our seats. And to feel our precious life energy moving through our bodies. And to feel the earth underneath us and her beauty and her power, her support, her resilience, her dedication to balance, and her ability to hold everything, to hold suffering, to hold beauty, to hold growth and renewal and transformation, and connecting with her under us and inside of us. We are earth bodies, connecting with her under us and inside of us. And then connecting with all the loving wisdom beings that are here to support us on this life path. Support us to remember the light and love that we are, our true nature. That is all of it. The sacred is in all of it. The sacred is in the shadow and the sacred is in the light. And taking a moment to bring gratitude to yourself for coming here today, for being on the path, for your self-care, for your care for others by caring for yourself, for your recognition of our interconnectedness, for being on the path. Take a moment and appreciate yourself for that. And then I invite you to take a moment and bring compassion to whatever part of you might have arisen in today's conversation that might feel uneasy or unsettled or need some care, need some connection. And some of you, most of us, might not feel an easy way to do that. So I'm going to suggest a way to do that. To just get in touch with the source of compassion. Maybe it's White Tara. Maybe it's a friend or a teacher or a pet or an animal. Get in touch with a great support helper of compassion. And then let that, as you breathe deeply and fully, enhancing your meditation, nourishing yourselves, let that connect with that part of you that needs compassion. And take a moment as you breathe just to watch that unfold, see what happens. Then I'd like to invite you to shift for a moment. Take a moment to remember some way you've just grown recently. It's spring, all of us are growing. Take a moment to remember some way you just grew recently. Maybe it was in a meditation and you had an insight. Maybe it was a way you opened your heart more to a family or friend. Maybe you changed something about your diet or your exercise. But take a moment to just notice some way you grew recently. And then bring compassion and gratitude. You can bring the same source to appreciate your growth, to appreciate your capacity, our capacity for that, and gratitude for our capacity for healing, growth, renewal, and coming home to our true natures. Take a moment to get in touch with it. And then taking all the time you need to complete this, come back to our gathering, remembering all of this. And may this time together that we've had benefit all beings. Thank you, Lopön.
Thank you, Gena. Thank you for that meditation. That reminded me how easy it is to skip over, for example, the ways we have grown. I love that inquiry. How have you grown even just in the last days? And sometimes it can feel like, once you get as old as this, there's no more growth, old dogs, no new tricks. But actually to honor, right? These small ways that we continue to grow, that we continue to open, that we meet the world with more honesty and a more open heart. So thank you for that invitation.
Yeah, I so appreciate the way you listen and the way you reflect and amplify the clarity of the teachings.
Well, it's been a joy to spend this hour with you, Gena, and a joy to be with all of you. Thank you for the comments and the questions and your presence. And as Gena said, may our time and our sharing be of benefit to many. And Dreame, I want to thank you as always for your graceful, skillful, easeful holding of all of us, always. So much love to everybody.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Adiful and Margot and everybody. Thank you, Windchild.
Thank you so much. Oh, I just want to say a big thank you for sharing your time, your experience and wisdom with us in this important and insightful conversation. I do hope we will carry forward the reflections that we've gained from our time with you today, and that we'll meet again very soon. Thank you so much. And dear audience, thank you for joining us this Sunday, and may the teachings of our guests continue to inspire and guide us all on the path. And I also invite you to take some time after this event to maybe reflect even more on what you've learned and experienced today. It would be just so nice to hear from you. We have a dedicated space for safe sharing, and it's called Star Mandala Network. So you are welcome to join it and see for yourself what it's all about. And now, following the tradition going all the way back to the time of the Buddha 2600 years ago, you have the opportunity to make an offering of dana to Lopön Charlotte and Gena. Dana is a Pali and Sanskrit word that means generosity, and offering dana creates an auspicious connection and is a beautiful expression of the interdependence between teacher and student. If you would like to offer dana, please follow the links you will see in the chat in a moment. So once again, thank you everyone. And we hope you will be with us again next Sunday for an event with an end-of-life coach, Rhonda Lopresti. May we meet again and again on the path, and may all beings benefit everywhere.
Om tare tu re. Mangalam Shri Mahapani Swaha. Om tare tu re. Mangalam Shri Mahapani Swaha. Om tare tu re. Mangalam Shri Mahapani Swaha. Om tare tu re.